Whether you are online or here in person, we want to say welcome back to the Maxon booth. We have a lot of fantastic presenters today, but it is my true pleasure to introduce my good friend John Jagsney. We're going to be walking through.
Hi, Internet.
Walking through everything from ZBrush to Substance to Cinema and Unreal. So, John Jagsney, take it away.
Thank you, Dryson, and thank you very much, everyone here and on the internet. My name is John Jagsney. I typically go by Jags, and as I give you my introduction, I will just open up my reel. We're not going to go to Vimeo. We are going to go into the renders folder I have and show my reel. So, long story short, I am a video creator. I guess I make stuff. That's pretty much it. I use Cinema 4D, Unreal Engine, ZBrush, Substance Painter, After Effects, DaVinci Resolve. I've pretty much touch everything, so then I can do all the stuff that my clients need, specifically in the tabletop and hobby game space. So that includes board games, sleeves for tabletop accessories like Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons, miniatures games. I do a lot of Kickstarter videos in that space, and I really just try and level up each project as best I can, and it really just depends on what tool the client needs. Sometimes I'll shoot stuff live action, sometimes I will render stuff in an offline render like Redshift, and if I needed something done fast, I will use Unreal. So all that is to say, I like making stuff. So today I want to be talking about this Kickstarter video that I created with one of my very good friends and collaborators and mentors in the toy space. This is a Kickstarter video for a toy line called Body Bags. And Body Bags is a mix and match monster parts kind of game, or toy rather, where you can buy a figure 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you get all these parts, and if you get the full set, you'll be able to create like a Frankenstein or a werewolf sort of thing. And with all of that, we took all of the toy sculpts that we got from my friend Jeff. He had a sculptor actually create the toys. Jeff did all the illustration design. I took the sculpts, brought it into ZBrush, retopologized it, painted it in Substance Painter, animated it, rendered it, made a Kickstarter video, and that Kickstarter is going live on May 1st, but this is the first sneak peek on all of that. So overall, my presentation is ZBrush to Substance to Cinema 4D to Unreal. So we're touching pretty much everything, and the last thing I need to say is that Unreal is a game engine, and because it is a game engine, we need to treat it as such. And one of the analogies I like to use is that Unreal is very much a very picky child that needs to only eat chicken nuggets. So this is an axe that I created in ZBrush and Cinema 4D and a handful of other pieces of software to get the actual look. Why is this video not opening up? That's okay. We can just keep going. You see the images here. The reason why I share this axe is all the topology is hand done and mixed in with a little bit of ZBrush, which we will cover very shortly, but there's parts of it that's just hand done. Sometimes as an artist, you just have to get in and do the work. I will say, I have no artist background. I did not go to art school. I started doing ZBrush in October, and the best educators I've found for ZBrush are Anna Carolina Pereira. Hello. That's okay. She has an amazing course on Cineversity that covers what buttons to press and what if certain things do, like masks and such. Then I watch almost all of Ian Robinson's live streams from the Maxon training team. He creates amazing stuff. And if you go back on my Instagram, I made a big tank that he did a live stream for in October. It took me way longer, and I could probably do it much faster. And then I've found other educators online. The primary one I've been learning from on other platforms is Abe Leal. He has a deep background in video game development, creating assets, and he's also very much a tabletop enthusiast, Dungeons & Dragons stuff like myself. So I've been following a lot of his content. So he's helped me get into ZBrush, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So let's go ahead and open up ZBrush. And this is the raw sculpt that I got from the toy sculptor from from my buddy Jeff. And if we look in the top right-hand corner over here, we can see that this entire figure is 2.7 million points. And if you have any experience with dealing with very dense meshes in Cinema 4D, if I hit Shift F on my keyboard, it turns black, not because it's a black material, but because look at all these points. Trying to animate all this stuff in any 3D DCC would set your computer on fire. So we need to find a way to get this to be much smaller. So whenever you get a toy sculpt like this, even CAD models or something like this, I will typically go through the process of some level of decimation and retopology. So in the Z plugin tool up here, there's all these plugins built into ZBrush, and there is this tool called the Decimation Master. And basically this is going to try and only allocate geometry to our mesh where it needs it. So if we look at the head here, we can see that the forehead is pretty flat. So maybe we don't need as much geometry in that spot, but around the nose, the mouth, the eyes, etc., we would need a lot more detail there to help that shape come through. So the first thing I always do before I do any of this is I will go into my geometry, or my subtool rather, first, and I will find the subtool. Now, if you're not familiar with ZBrush, unlike an outliner, or it's not called outliner, your subtool panel here is basically your outliner. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off everything, and we're just going to work on the head today during this presentation. So with the head object by itself, I'm going to go ahead and rename this, and we'll call this Dynamesh. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go to pre-process current. And you could theoretically batch this, but I don't want to do everything all at once because I want to be able to have just a little bit of control here. So if I go ahead and close this panel here, if I look in the top right-hand corner, we can see that, oh, I didn't actually decimate. So let's just go back, Z plugin, this button, this little window, pre-process. I didn't hit the decimate button, that's why. So we pre-process it. Pre-processing is basically saying, hey, computer, think about this. Then we hit the decimate button, and after about 0.2 seconds, we hit Shift F, and it looks pretty much the same, but if I look at my active points here, it's about 42,000 points. And if I click on my history, it's at 200,000 points. So it is much, much smaller here, and we still have a lot of detail. So awesome, cool, we're getting somewhere, but the problem is we could theoretically use this as our base, but getting paint on this would be still a nightmare because we don't have any edge loops, so then we can't like really select the face or anything like that. So we need to use the built-in ZBrush tools to help Z-remesh this. So with the Dynamesh version here, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. And when I duplicate it, I'm going to rename this, and I'll just call it Remesh. Oh, come on, dude. Remesh. We're going to ignore the caps right there. And then I'm going to I'm going to hide the Dynamesh version, and I'm going to go into my geometry panel down here, and we have a bunch of different options, but we want Z-remesher. Now, I know this is around 42,000 points. I want to make sure that this still has enough geometry in certain spots of the figure, and the easiest, fastest way without having to create special selections is just hit the Z-remesher button. So we can go ahead and set this value to 10, and this target poly count is multiplied by 1,000. So we're looking at 10,000 polygons here. So we're taking this 42,000 point mesh, trying to get it down to about 10,000. So we just hit the Z-remesh button, and we're going to see what happens with this. It will take a second, and depending on how complex your mesh is, it will take a long time, and you just have to wait, or it will just take a very, very short time. And this is just one of those things that's part of the process. And let's be real, if you were trying to do this manually, retopologizing by hand, this would take you about at least a day, if not more, or so I've been told. Now, it looks a lot chunkier, a lot grosser now, but we're down to about 18,000 points, which is totally fine. But if we hit Shift F, we can see that we have quads everywhere now, which is very nice. We're getting a little crunchy spots here, and sometimes I'll go in and I will use one of my brushes to smooth it out, but I'm not going to do anything here, there. I'm just going to use this as is because we need to get the high poly detail back onto this mesh here. So we're going to go back up to my subtool panel, and I have this Dynamesh version. And now we can see that with both of them turned on and visible, there's definitely some weird overlap happening. But again, because we're only working with 18,000 points, and the previous head had about like 200,000 points, we want to get this detail back on. If we solo right here, we can see that we basically lost all the veins in the ears. To fix this, we're going to hit Control D on our keyboard like 3 times. And now we're back up to 200, or almost 300,000 points. And if I solo, it's smooth, but it doesn't have that same detail as the original sculpt. So we have to go into our project option down here. It's not project, it is project. And basically with both of our pieces in the frame, it's going to project all the details and push the polygons in the direction of the other meshes in our scene. So I need to make sure that I have my remesh object selected with the Dynamesh visible. You don't want to have anything else visible in the scene, otherwise it'll get confused and break. You hit the project button and reveal this menu and hit project all, and after a second it's going to push all those details into this toy sculpt here. So now we can see here that we have a lot more detail back in this, which is exactly what I want, because now I have a super high poly version that has all those details, but I can hit Shift D on my keyboard and go back down to the 18,000 point mesh. So that's the basic process of getting like a CAD model or a toy model and getting it into something that is a little bit easier to animate with in Zebra or in Cinema 4D or Unreal Engine. So now we want to paint on this. But the problem with this is there's no UVs on this. With the Z plugin option here, we can hit the little icon to redock it, and then we're going to go into the UV master tab, and we have a couple options here. First off, we can unwrap this based on symmetry, but we can see here that the hair on this figure is not quite symmetrical. The face does look symmetrical, but because the hair is not symmetrical, we're going to uncheck this. We could very well make poly groups here, and we could go ahead and hit Shift F. We can see it's a green poly group, and then if I go ahead and hold Control and paint around the ears, I'm going to undo that really quick and hit X on my keyboard to add some symmetry and just add a poly group like so. Let's go ahead and look at the back. Yeah, it looks like we got both sides. And if we hit Shift W or Control W, now we have a poly group around the ears. I could very well add a poly group around the face and just paint around this one spot like so. And hit Control W again, and now we have a poly group there. So just using some basic masks and creating groups around our mesh, we create these poly groups, and we could unwrap here. Now, before I do this, the traditional workflow that I've been told by Mr. Ian Robinson is to work on a clone with some of the new tools. You don't need to do that as much, but I'm just going to do that anyways because it's good to show all the old traditional ways sometimes. So now what I created is a separate subtool menu here, or it's almost like a separate Z tool, and now we're just looking at the head, but if I hit D on my keyboard, we're not going into the high poly version, so we can't unwrap our object when we have subdivisions on our mesh. So in this clone here, we have our poly groups. If we hit Shift F, we can go ahead and hit unwrap. But before we do that, there's also one thing that's worth addressing is when you create a 2D representation, a UV map of your toy, you don't want seams in the most camera visible spots. So we definitely don't want one on the face. We don't want anything that's frontward facing. We want to put all the seams maybe on the back of the head, or maybe on the little socket points down here where we are not really going to ever see the camera over there ever. So in the enable control painting option, we can go to protect, and then it's just like a paintbrush. We can go ahead and protect around our face. We don't want any seams around this spot right here, and then we also don't want any seams around the ears, and we don't want anything under the chin like so. So we'll create this sort of mask, this protection, so none of the seams will ideally be in that spot. Again, we're letting the computer do a lot of the work for us, so it might give us some weird errors. You never know when the computer is going to do its thing. So now we go to the attract option. This is basically going to attract a seam over a specific spot. If I hold Control and Alt on my keyboard, I'm going to go ahead and make a mask selection down here and only apply my paint into the unmasked area. So if I go ahead and paint my attract UV down here, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that, hey, we want our seams here. I'm going to go around to the back side and center up my sculpt. and hold control and then drag outside of my figure, and it's going to clear the mask, and I will go ahead and attract an edge there, and maybe I will attract an edge there. I want to make sure that I go ahead and clean this one spot up so we don't get any seams there. I'm cool with that. Now we can go ahead and hit unwrap and let it do its thing. This little progress bar is going to think about it, and then if we go ahead and hit flatten, it's going to give us a UV representation of our figure here. We can see that we have, this is the face. It still just looks like an island of quads, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about that because this is all we need to get some half-decent paints into Substance Painter. Now, I will address someone in the game dev pipeline is probably like, Jags, that's wrong, don't do that, you need clean seams. Yes, in a game dev pipeline you 100% do, but sometimes you just got to get the work done, and if you know how it has a UV tag on it, so we go ahead and copy, and then we go back to our main project, and then we hit paste UVs. So if you do have subdivisions on a model, you can't unwrap with UV Master here and see your UVs. But if I go down to UV map down here, you also have some options to create UVs, and we can go ahead and hit morph UV, so you can always just double check that. Now we can see this horrifying island of UV in this one spot. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I am going to skip this, but you can go in and fix this little seam. If I go ahead and unmorph UV, it looks like there's going to be a seam right there. And if I go back into my clone, we can go ahead and make sure I'm in the right spot. Flatten. Unflatten, aha, check seams right there. We can see that there's a seam in that one spot. I'm not too worried about that, and for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to blow through. But this is just one of those things where, hey, you might need to go ahead and fix that. And because we did add those polygroups, maybe it is giving us that seam right there. So I would go ahead and fix that if I was doing something true for my client. But it did a lot of the work for me, and I have a lot to cover. So we're just going to go through that. So back into our head sculpt, we now have something that we could go ahead and start exporting into Substance Painter. But before I do that, I do want to share something for my Cinema 4D friends. So let's say hypothetically you don't want to use the ZBrush UV unwrapping tools, even though they are actually pretty solid. Let's go ahead and open up the creature arm right here. Let's go ahead and make it visible. Now we're going to work on this. We're going to do the very same thing. We're going to go to Decimation Master, go to Pre-Process really quick, and I'm not going to go through the entire process of full retopo and projection, but let's say you decimate it and then you go to your geometry tab here. Let's go ahead and Z-remesh this like so. And after a moment, it will give us something a little bit cleaner that we can work with that is going to be in quads. And the reason why I do like being able to bounce between Cinema 4D and ZBrush is sometimes I'm just going to use the automatic unwrapping tools. So with this now, Z-remesh, if I hit Shift F, I can see that we have quads. We lost a lot of detail, and I didn't duplicate the other one just because I'm kind of going through, but this one feature I'm super stoked about. I'm going to go to Cinema 4D really quick. I'm going to hit a new window. I'm going to bring this down, and I am back in ZBrush, and there's this Go Z function. And if you hit the R button, it's basically going to say, hey, where is the Cinema 4D file that we want to Go Z from? I'm not going to worry about any of my other stuff here. We want Cinema 4D. Let's go ahead and hit Go Z. Hit continue, and it's going to do a think. And if I go into Cinema 4D, hey, look, we have our creature arm like so. And if I go to my UV edit tab and I go ahead and hit my set UVW from projection, we now have this projection of the UV. But the problem with this is that we have our polygons overlapping. The easiest, fastest way is just go to the automatic UV, choose one of these options, hit apply, let it think, and now we have islands for our toy. And then we could go ahead and go back into ZBrush by hitting extensions and Go Z and Go Z exporter. And if we go into our UV map down here, we have Morph UV, and we have those same UVs from Cinema 4D. Granted, the seams will not quite be as favorable, so I found that one of the most scary things for a lot of motion designers is going to be UVs. I get it. I hate it too. They're really annoying, but once you can get a handle on what the computer will do for you, it actually is not that bad. So all that being said, figure out what is your favorite workflow, Cinema 4D or ZBrush, and just dive into UVs a little bit. They're not that bad, and it'll help you get better textures later, which brings me to my next part. I covered all the decimation, remeshing, etc., etc. So this is mainly for my notes. We're going to go into Substance Painter now. So before you do your Substance Painter stuff, it's always worth doing a super quick check. Just make sure that the shape of your mesh looks pretty much identical to the FBX exporter, and in here we have a bunch of FBX exporter options. Little gotcha though that I do need to mention. I'm not sure how big the scale is that the artist did their content for this, and it's always a good idea if you're trying to get into Unreal to set the export scale in your panel on the right side to like a little bigger, because if you export something super tiny into Unreal, it will just delete polygons. And I've had many projects where I'm like, what is going on? Unfortunately, it is because of that. So make sure that you set your export scale to be just a little larger. So once all that's done, I'm going to go ahead and hit D on my keyboard. So now this is at the, what is it, 75,000 points, which will be fine for Unreal and Cinema 4D. It does seem a little dense, but I've been told that traditional game characters can be somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 polygons, so if I'm not doing any deformation to this, I'm cool with this. Sometimes technology can be magic like that, so I'm on the second subdivision level, and I am just going to take this object, this visible object right here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit export. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this somewhere on my computer. We'll go to Elements, FBX, and new folder. Call this Vampire Head Demo. And we will go ahead and rename the last 4 characters. Encasing for Substance Painter is very important, low, because this is the low poly version. So then from here, we're going to hit D on the keyboard and go to the high poly mesh, where it's going to have all the detail. We're going to get all those veins and stuff there. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hit export. We're going to select the old one and not overwrite it. We're going to go ahead and hit type in high. And this is important because we're going to take all the 3D data and bring it into Substance Painter so we can get a really clean normal map. So once all that ZBrush stuff is done, we're pretty much ready to go to Substance Painter. I'm going to go open up Substance Painter really quick, and we're not going to do a full paint of this figure live because I do have a lot more things I want to cover to get this into Unreal, but I just want to show you that you don't have to always do really detailed node shader trees in Redshift or whatever renderer you choose. Sometimes if you're not doing anything super crazy, you can just use Substance, and I believe it's $30 a month, and I'll spend 30 bucks to save hours of my time building shaders. So I'll take this Vampire Head, the low version, that's important, drop it into Substance Painter, and the default template I will typically use is I'll set it to 4K. I will use the PBR, this first one right here, and then make sure I set my document resolution to 4K. Now when I import this into Substance, we have our head right here. And one thing that's worth addressing is that when you export a model from ZBrush, it does flip the UV. So if you do the GoZ workflow, it might get a little funky, but stay tuned for some tutorials. I will show how to fix this if you are so inclined to do a GoZ workflow. But long story short, we have our 2D representation, and we could very well add a paint layer, and it's very much like Photoshop, where you can, with our paint bucket here, we can add a black mask here, and then right click on this, add a paint, and let's go ahead and set a color here to, let's set it to red for now, and click, where's the OK button? Oh, red's fine. Where's my brush? we got to select our paint layer right here, and we can paint. And now it would be very easy to paint on my figure. So this brings me to my next point. If you're ever doing toy sculpts or like an animation for like a little toy commercial and you're using this workflow, you're going to get something called color callouts. So whenever you work with a toy designer, physical paint is, you don't have the same RGB spectrum that you would get in a computer program. You're limited to whatever the real world will create. So you will get these PMS colors. This is what I got from my colleague Jeff, and he was like, make it these colors. So the general workflow is you would have this menu, or your PMS colors up here, and you'd go into your fill layer, and let's go ahead and select the color for the eyes. We will go ahead and hit X on the keyboard, or we'll just delete that paint layer, and you would just go ahead, re-add the paint layer, and paint on the eyes. Make sure that we're using the white mask instead of the black, and hey, look, now we would have the red eyes. But the reason why we use Substance Painter is the croissant right here. The croissant is going to let us get all the detail of the high poly mesh onto the low poly through textures. So we're going to navigate to our Kickstarter video that needs to be done in like 3 weeks. We can't sit there and do everything by hand a lot of the time. So now, if we look at this, we can see that there's a lot more detail in it, but we're not adding more geometry. It's just in the normal map. And then, on top of this, when you have your Substance Painter object here, and you have the bake of your object, you have these materials in here called smart materials, and these are effectively like presets that are in Substance Painter, but it's going to look at some of the details of the normal map and where it is in world space and give us a little extra pizzazz, so to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and search up metal, just for fun. I do like a lot of the metal stuff. Let's go ahead and select this steel painted scrape dirty. And if we look at the preview here, we can see that the preview has some metal edgeware, and we can go ahead and drag this on top. And if we let it load, it's going to create this folder of all these materials down here, and it's adding procedural surface imperfections around different parts of the mesh without actually having to do any manual painting and work. Now, it is a general wise idea to go ahead and add a little bit of your own detail to this, so you're not just taking whatever the computer generates, because then it kind of looks CG generated. So another thing I will do is I will go ahead and add a paint layer. Let's go ahead and turn off the preview really quick. You're not just limited to letting the computer do the work for you. Let's go ahead and set this color to, we'll set it to black in a second, but I'll add a black mask. Set the color to black just to quickly demonstrate this. Right click, and we will go ahead and add a generator. Now, this generator is going to give us the option to add either dirt or metal edgeware. I'll add dirt for now, and now it's going to give us this property to basically allow us to add more grunge, add less grunge, increase the scale, etc. And now, like, honestly, that looks horrifying, but I still think that this looks pretty cool. So that's basically the workflow. In Substance Painter, you get your paints, you paint on your colors, and then you add some surface imperfections based on the generators that you would need. And it's not just limited to color. You in your fill layer in the little paint bucket, you can also affect your height, your roughness, your metalness, etc. So I could very well set the roughness here to a much lower number, and now the black part is going to be much shinier, and maybe I could make it metallic, and now the black part is going to be also a metallic texture as well. And then you just export this as materials that you can use in any renderer of your choice. Because I use Unreal, it's fast, but you could do this in Redshift, whatever you want to use. So this is the UV tile I created for my actual live project, where we don't have any of the seams over the front. So again, no UV is going to be perfect. Everyone's going to be a little different, but it's important to know where the camera is looking. So now let's talk about where the camera is actually looking. We have animation. So let's say you're done with your paint. You export all of your toys, and now you have a Cinema 4D scene with all of your stuff imported. And this is a very simple setup. If we go into my material option down here, while my Redshift previews didn't load up on this computer, we can see that the materials are there. It's a simple color. We have our metalness, we have our roughness, we have our normal map, and we have our height and displacement. Very easy to just deal with these kind of materials because it's 4 slots. You don't have to do a lot. So let's talk a little bit about the animation stuff. So I have this scene, not this one, we have this one right here. And it seems like my materials didn't load in this project. Well, fortunately, we can go up to not Asset Browser. We can go to our project Asset Inspector. We can go to, oh, actually, if you needed to relink your stuff, you'd go to the Asset Inspector. You would go ahead and hit Select Missing Assets, Filter, and Relink Assets. And wherever that is saved, you can go ahead and just hit the root folder, and it's going to connect everything. So that's a really nice feature I like. I actually did get a little bit of a crash in Cinema for some reason. So we're just going to go ahead and task manager that. And just like another day in the office, we're going to fix that crash by opening up Cinema 4D, and come on, dude, do the thing, do the thing. Well, while that closes, I'll go ahead and show you a little bit about the actual animation process for this. So long story short, if I jump into this little time lapse right here, when it comes to working with, oh, and the MOV player didn't work previously either. That is okay. Let's just go open up Cinema 4D because the MOV was being slower. Now, I don't blame the computer because I am literally pushing this computer to its absolute limits because I have Substance Painter, ZBrush, After Effects, and Unreal Engine open up all at the same time. I'm asking a lot out of this computer. This is the computer I typically use at home does have two 3090s and a lot more RAM. So it is one of those things where if you're bouncing between all these pieces of software, you might have to close some of them, or if you're a crazy person like me and okay with burning out your graphics card, you will have everything open all at once. Come on, Cinema. Do the thing. Do the thing. Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and preview the After Effects file really quick while Cinema opens. Actually, Cinema 4D did open. Come on. Come on. How often does this happen live? Almost all the time. So we're going to go to File, and we're going to open up the animation file that I was working with for my project with Jeff. Demo animation and NAB. So if I click on my dope sheet down here, we can see here that I should have all my animation, and if I hit Control A on all of my objects in my outliner, we have all these keyframes creating this animation. Now, because I know I'm bringing this into Unreal, I'm not worried about some of the extra little artifacts. So, for example, as we spin the figure, I don't want to see all these other pieces that are kind of like all the wolf there and the wolf head, and there's a little octopus arm back there. But we're going to deal with that in Unreal. So first off, let's go ahead and relink those materials. I guess with the crash, it did go ahead and get rid of the material links, but select missing assets, filter asset, relink assets, and we will go to my root folder and sync it up. And now it's all synced. So now it's going to load up all those materials. Let's just give it a second to save. Sometimes you have to baby the computer a little bit and let it do a think, but now we have all the materials on our object. We can go ahead and hit save on our keyboard. And again, this is very simple animation. We're not doing any deformation. We're not doing any crazy procedural stuff. It's just simple position, scale, rotation. And if I hit the tab key on my keyboard, we can see all of my animation curves over here. And it's just some simple eases. If we go ahead and play this back fully, we're creating that sensation of this figure coming together, trying to emulate what my buddy Jeff really wanted, to really hammer in the mix and match monster parts. And the biggest thing when it comes to creating a little animation like this is start with music. I'm not going to play the music here, but it is always easier to animate your stuff with sound. So the way you would do that is in Cinema 4D, you would make a null object, and you would call this sound, and drop it into your timesheet, add special tracks, sound, find your file. Once you do your animation, we're ready to go to Unreal Engine. So with the new Cineware plugin, that is right here, this is where in your Maxon One subscription, you can go ahead and download it. It is very easy and convenient nowadays. Like 4 years ago, you had to put it in folders, but now it just goes where it needs to. So install the Cineware plugin, and then in the Cinema 4D extension tabs, you'll see the Unreal Direct Link Sync or a Datasmith file. Lately, or most of the time, I'll typically use the Datasmith file, but the Direct Link Sync is more of like a live link that you can bounce back and forth between Unreal and Cinema 4D. So let's go ahead and open up Unreal. I have this empty scene with a skylight. Now, quick summary of Unreal. I like to think of it as its own operating system, so to speak. So we have all of our folders down here for our project. We need to import the Cinema 4D file. So once you have the plugin installed, you go to the cube plus sign here, Datasmith, and direct link import. Let's go ahead and go back to Cinema 4D. We go into extensions, direct link sync, and we need to make sure that we hit the cog wheel. I don't recommend hitting this button by default because we want to make sure that we select animation. By default, this is unchecked. So always just double check that really quick. We will go ahead and hit OK, and the computer is going to do a think. It's going to be like, OK, what are we trying to bring over? And fortunately, with Unreal, we can bring in Redshift cameras, Redshift lights. We can bring in Redshift materials. But I do recommend doing Unreal materials if you need to have absolute control over the roughness, especially if your client is going to have some feedback on some of those things. But using the Redshift materials is going to at least give you a quick base. So if I wanted to send out a quick play blast of this animation, I can hit Control B and send this. And my buddy Jeff would not really understand what's going on if all these colors were black or some generic gray. So I will send Play Blast over from Cinema for review. But once we have our Datasmith linked, we have our computer selected, we can go ahead and hit Select Our Source. Now, it's asking us, where do we want to save this? And like I said earlier, Unreal is very much like a operating system, so we need to make sure we save this in somewhere in our project that makes sense. I'm just going to put it in the root for now, and now it's going to ask us, what do we want to bring over? Geometry, materials, lights, cameras, animations. Typically, you can select everything. I set this to 4K just because why not? It's real time. I don't care. It's going to work. Most of the time, it works. So I'll hit import, and it's going to do a think. And from here, now we have our little animation. In our content browser down here, we have all the folders for the content that was in our Cinema 4D file. So that includes our textures. It brought in all the textures. It brought in the materials, the Redshift materials. It brought in our geometry, so all of our 3D meshes, and we can go ahead and preview this. Here's that bug leg, and we also have our animation. So if we double click on this little clapboard right here, and we go ahead and hold right click on our viewport, we can see that all the pieces are spread out. But if I hit the play button and I fly forward, we are getting this animation in real time of this figure. And everything is pretty much seamless. It's awesome. Now, what I do need to do is address the camera. So a couple things. The camera in Cinema 4D, because it's a Redshift camera, I typically do not play with any of the Redshift camera settings in Cinema 4D if I'm going into Unreal. I change the focal length just to make sure that my perspective is correct, but in the optical settings, you have your exposure tab and your focus distance. Now, if the default of your focus distance is 2000, so if you look through your camera in Unreal, first off, if we select perspective and we look through our camera, it's going to turn black. Why is that? Well, I mentioned the exposure earlier. If I type in EXP, the camera is doing a post-process effect. It's like an adjustment layer in After Effects, where whatever the camera sees, it's going to apply this effect, and it's going to auto-expose the image like a traditional camera, but if we unselect our metering mode, it's going to give us light back into our scene. Okay, cool. The next thing is our focus distance, and by default, it will be set to 2000, and if I set this to 2000, it's probably going to be blurry. But with the little eyedropper here, we can go ahead and hit select on our object, and now our object is visible and in frame. Awesome. Cool. We have our animation. Couple other things that we have to do, little gotchas. The first thing is this lock to display rate at runtime. This will cause some motion blur issues, so I do recommend turning it off. So we'll go ahead and select that. Now, the other thing is that the Cinema 4D level sequencer will bring in all the animations of our mesh, but it does duplicate everything. So what I do is I type in VIS, and we're basically looking for any object in our level sequencer that has a visibility tag. We're going to go ahead and select everything and delete it, because what the sequencer is doing down here is it's referencing our outliner, kind of like Cinema 4D, where you have your timeline down here and then your outliner. It's referencing anything that's up there, so we can create the animation. So it does do a duplication thing when we come from Cinema into Unreal. So that's just another little thing I clean up. And the last biggest little gotcha about Unreal is that when you bring in the level sequence, it doesn't create a camera cut track. A camera cut track is kind of like a video editor like DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere. We basically need to make sure we're looking through our main camera. So in this camera cut track, I'm going to add my Redshift camera, and I'm going to make sure that it fits the in and out of my level sequence, plus a little more. I'm going to hold Control and mouse wheel backwards to give myself more frames, and then I'm going to set this animation to like 240 frames. Let's say I'm doing a little YouTube ad for this Kickstarter. I want to make sure I have some extra breathing room where the toy is actually sitting in the frame. Awesome. We'll render out more frames. We could very well just have the last frame be a still frame, but I'm lazy and I don't want to do that. I want it to feel like an actual video clip. So all that being said, that's done. We have our animation. Last thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I go ahead and select 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm going to go to my Q, or my little plus sign of all of my objects down here, go to Actor Hidden in Game, find the spot where it does the spin, where it ends the spin, go ahead and add a keyframe, and I will turn it off, and turn it off, add keyframe, and turn it off, add keyframe. Then I'm going to go right here. Aha, I'm going to go right here. Yeah, right there. And I will add a keyframe, turn it on, keyframe, turn it on. Oh, undo that. Make sure we don't have all of our objects selected. Turn on and turn on, and that will finish up, and that will fix our visibility issue. So now we have that spin happening without actually seeing any of those artifacts. Now we can render. So on my YouTube channel, I do have a video that talks a little bit more about the render settings in Unreal to get the absolute best quality, but for this presentation purpose, we're just going to use the default. After Effects artists love their PNG sequences, as do I. I did start in After Effects, so I'm going to make sure I add my PNG sequence, and I will go ahead and add anti-aliasing. This is just like the default anti-aliasing. It does add a little bit to the render time, and especially when we increase this temporal sample, but again, it's still going to be super fast. I'm going to go ahead and go to my output directory here. Go to my little 3 dots, and let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to call this live presentation 005, sure. And then I will double click that, select folder, and hit accept. And let's just hit render. And we're going to see how fast it renders, and it is rendering pretty much in real time. And the reason why I like this is now that I have this, I can easily bring this into After Effects. Now, I'm going to cancel this really quick because I did remember one thing I do want to make sure I do. I'm going to go into my render settings and make sure that we're writing an alpha channel, and then I want to make sure that accumulator includes alpha, because I know that this ad is going to be on a transparent background, a purple backdrop. So I want to make sure that I am rendering with alpha, so then we can composite this over the logo or something, or we can add the lightning effects behind and in front of our object without having to make masks in After Effects. You could also do more advanced things like rendering crypto mats or something like that, but we can see that this is rendering super fast. And if I go into After Effects now, we have our file, and this was the little practice I was doing. Let's go ahead and show it live, though. We'll go to my pre-renders folder. We will find the content that I just rendered out. I think it's under footage. No, not footage. Renders. Where did I save that? Maxon NAB pre-renders UE5 live presentation. Okay. After Effects. Pre-renders UE5 live presentation 005, and we can see here, hey look, it's rendered on alpha. Awesome. Let's go ahead and drop it in. We can go ahead and drop this into a new pre-comp, and now we have our shot. Let's go ahead and prove it. Hey look, there's an alpha channel. We got our motion blurred pieces, and now we are ready to do our stuff in After Effects. Now, there's the question I get all the time, especially on my YouTube channel. Why don't I just do this all in Unreal Engine? You could, but unfortunately, there is a challenge with that. Getting 3D camera data from Unreal Engine into After Effects is a nightmare. It is annoying, and you could export your camera information from Unreal into as an FBX, but it's just going to be weird. So I use Cinema 4D as a bridge. This bridge is basically creating that connection between Unreal and After Effects. So if we go to our render settings tab up here, we can look at our save option, and what I most want is this compositing project file. This compositing project file is going to give us 3D data of where all these objects are in my scene. The reason why this is important is in the animation I did for Jeff, we wanted this little lightning to interact with our figure. So under every single object here, I have a null object, and that is going to be my 3D position data in After Effects. So if I go up to my save option, let's go up to save file, and we will go ahead and make sure that we have to make sure that the file for the image is set somewhere. Don't worry about it. You're going to get the weird footage missing in a second, but let's go ahead and demo this AEC file. An AEC file is going to give us that 3D data. So we're just going to drop it into this folder right here, hit save. And let's go ahead and go up to File, Import File, and let's find our AEC file, C4D, demo animation, and where did I save that AEC? Herp derp. File, save project, AEC, project file, demo animation. Aha, I probably went into my... yes, I did. I did not go to the... Oh, interesting. Where's my AEC file? Where did it go? Well, I'm just going to go ahead and drag it into the project outliner. Project files, project C4D, demo animation, and AEC. Let's go ahead and drop in. Oh, come on, dude. Import... Well, I will add that one thing I did do is I do use the plugin called AEC4D Pro a lot of the time, and the reason why I do use that plugin is it does give you a little window to bring that stuff over. Project files, C4D, and let's just say all acceptable files, all files. Come on, import. Huh, oh, you know what? I did not enable the plugin in After Effects. So you have, okay, so on my home computer, I did not enable this plugin. So fortunately, I do have a demo file right here. So you do need the AEC4D plugin to 0 and 0. So now if I go ahead and turn off transparency, We can see that we have our nulls, and when you do have everything selected, it does get a little unhappy. But if I go ahead and select this left arm null, we can see that we have our position data, and where's it going? Did it go? Should be right there, right arm null. So then what we do from here is we can go ahead and add a solid object, and we can go to our effects and presets. Come on, dude. And then we type in advanced lightning. And this is the cheatiest, hackiest way. No, we don't want the 3D stuff. We go ahead and go to our lightning type and set this to two-way strike. And we will go ahead and add a couple expressions to this. So the expression is going to be this right here. So this expression in After Effects is going to convert the 3D data into something that the 2D viewport can recognize. So I'm going to go ahead and hold Alt and click on my origin right there, and I will go ahead and drop this expression in, and I will go ahead and select one of these layers. Let's say, we'll use the pick whip, and let's find the ape arm. Ape arm, or ape arm. Keep going, and select right there. So now this should be locked on to that arm right there. And then the other side, and I'm realizing I'm getting a little issue right there, but that is something I would go ahead and fix when I had the AEC plugin. And I would basically take the same expression and I would tie this to the socket on the actual body, which is right arm null right there. And now we would get that position data exactly where it is. So we would get that advanced lightning effect. And then you would basically create something, once you have all of that information, you would create something like, oh, right, and it's not going to import the actual video. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to go to my presentation, because basically that's the entire workflow. We would use Cinema 4D as a bridge. We do our renders in Unreal Engine, and we would do our compositing and stuff in After Effects after the fact. So with all that being said, I'm going to jump up to the Kickstarter video that is on my Vimeo account right here. UV, retopologize, paint it, review it, make sure it looks good. Cinema 4D, animate it, render in Unreal, composite in After Effects, make cool stuff. And that is pretty much my entire workflow. Thank you very much.
One thing I have always admired about you, Jags, is your ability to dive deep into a software, learn the technical stuff, and the fact that you've only been in ZBrush for 6 months, and to be able to show us a complete client, real-world situation from concept to finish in an hour is proof of that. That's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
We do have a couple minutes for any questions we have here, right in the front.
Isn't there, if I remember correctly, some kind of tag you need to
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So,
do you want to recap the question for those online real quick?
Yeah. So there's one more thing that is worth addressing. When you export your AEC4D file, there is something called a Cineware tag. So you right-click on the null, go to Render Tags in Cineware. That is important for the AEC file to get that 3D data. So thank you, Matt, for calling that out. Yeah. Yes. 100%.
Right here.
Keeg.
As someone who learned ZBrush in 6 months, or learned a lot of ZBrush in 6 months, what are like your pro tips for getting started?
Every days. Do it 20 minutes every day. I'm going to reference both Ian Robinson and Paul from the Maxon team. I've watched some of their live streams. Get in it, do it every day. You're going to make a lot of garbage. It's going to be terrible. You go to my Instagram, there's a lot of garbage up there. But I know a lot more buttons now just being in it. And do not try and do more. Do not try and do your dream project now. Start with small, bite-sized pieces. Like my favorite thing is Warcraft or Diablo Blizzard-style weapons. So I'm doing a lot of swords and stuff as like that. That's what sparks joy for me. Find something that's bite-sized and do that as much as you can. 20 minutes a day at least, and just make it like a training session rather than like this has to be perfect.
All right, if anybody wants to watch Jags demo all of this fun stuff, he will be in the back for the demo area, and you're welcome to go back there and ask one-on-one questions. And once again, we'll be starting our next presentation in about 10 minutes. Thank you for tuning in.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Don't forget to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and you'll make some gains. That's the end of my YouTube videos. Bye, friends.